Good morning. Welcome to our teaching today. We are on part 5 of our Unlocking Emotional Freedom series, and this is a good one. And so I'm excited to get started. Remember, let me open up the chat for everybody. One of these days I will get good at remembering. Okay, the chat is open. If you want to leave comments in the chat, the Q&A is open. You can comment or ask questions in there anonymously. And remember, today is a teaching call, so we won't be doing coaching today. Coaching will be tomorrow. But I love to do the teaching calls right before coaching calls, because often after a teaching call, you have something that you want some coaching on. And so bring those tomorrow, or if you can't make excuse me, if you can't make the live coaching call, be sure to submit your question and I will answer that. We have a lot to talk about today, so I am going to get started. Let me pull up my notes here. And I will try to remember to check on the chat and the Q&A, but I want to get going because I really have tried to keep these kind of short and not too long. So we are on part 5 of our mini series of Unlocking Emotional Freedom. And so far we've talked about avoiding emotions. We've talked about the gifts we can find in the negative emotions. We've talked about our suffering sentences. And last week we talked about this idea of freedom being an acronym for a way to unlock the emotional freedom, and the F being facing our emotions. So today we're going to talk about the R part of that acronym. And so we're moving on to the R in freedom, and it's called reframing. So we had facing our emotions. Oh, no, don't mind that I accidentally, oh, you can't, can you see it? Let me see here. Let me get myself back in. Okay, you can kind of see it. Accidentally spelled it wrong for a second until I realized. So today we're going to talk about reframing, and I'm going to talk about what that is. Then I'm going to actually show you how to do that. Okay. I feel like this is a big one. And today we're going to talk all about how to reframe the thoughts or the beliefs that you are carrying around. So a few weeks ago, we talked about the suffering sentences. We're going to learn how to reframe those suffering sentences. I think that then another thing that this reframing can do is it can help us with our triggers. Honestly, I wish I could come up with another name for triggers, but triggers, everyone understands what those are, so we're going to use that. But they do happen, and sometimes we have to address them also. Sometimes we get triggered or activated in our nervous system, and how to reframe those thoughts, those beliefs about your infidelity. Those are the things we're going to talk about today, because they're causing you a lot of pain, and the pain is optional. That's what I want you to understand. So this is going to be so helpful for your emotions when you learn how to do this. So what happens when you get triggered or a belief comes back to you? Here's what happens. Your body goes to work to create the emotional state that you have conditioned it to create, or the one that you are activating by the thoughts and the beliefs that you have in your head. And in our coaching program, Enjoy Bound, we call those thoughts default thoughts. They're the ones that you have kind of conditioned your brain to continue to think over and over and over. And your body is the most powerful pharmacy on earth, because within milliseconds of something happening, or you thinking about a thought, or someone saying something to you, your body produces emotions to match your internal thoughts, or it'll produce the emotions that you've just gotten really, really good at activating and producing lately. And it will just keep doing that over and over and over. So your body is like a bartender, and it keeps score of your favorite emotions: anger, resentment, loneliness, bitterness, fear. And it can make those cocktails of emotions so fast. It's incredible how fast it can make them. So after experiencing infidelity, we often have this voice in our head, and I call it the victim voice. And that voice loves to offer us thoughts and beliefs. And if you let those thoughts and beliefs go unchecked and you don't make yourself aware of them and you don't try to reframe them, your body will just learn to create this internal experience that matches the thoughts and beliefs. I did a little experiment yesterday, and I posted on Instagram asking women to share their current thoughts about the infidelity. I'm sorry, you guys. This COVID I had has lingered and lingered. It's been 3 weeks now. Let me mute myself for a second and clear my throat. I'll be right back. Okay. Unmute myself. Yes. Okay. Hopefully, that is a little better and I can make it through the rest of this. All right, here we go. Let me figure out where I was here. So your body, it can make anger, it can make resentment, it can make frustration, it can make embarrassment. It can literally make any emotion that you ask it. But it can also make all the other emotions, all the emotions you want to experience, like joy and peace. Those are the two most common ones that women tell me that they want to experience, are joy and peace. And so I want you to think about, what is the emotional state that you are in most of the time? The emotional state that you spend most of your time in. Because your feelings matter, because those feelings, those emotions are how you experience your life. So do you want to spend your life believing the lies your victim voice keeps telling you? Or are you ready to break free from that and gain the emotional freedom that you really desire? So how can you start to become aware of this so you can take more control over it? There's a lot of ways to do that. But one way is to reframe the thoughts and beliefs in life with what and how God sees you and how he would speak of you. And, that victim voice is much more critical and much more harsh than God would ever be. So can we replace our victim voice with the voice that loves us, with the voice of the person who already knows our story, with the voice of the person who's never going to leave us or forsake us and knows every hair on our body? So a great practice is to start to ask yourself, what is my victim voice saying? And then, am I going to choose to believe it? And when you start to do this practice, and when you start to get really good at this, you will be shocked at how critical that voice is, how negative it is, how much it's keeping you stuck in the emotions that you don't want to be stuck in, how much it's keeping you from the freedom, the emotional freedom that you really so desire. And when you become aware, then you can learn to create distance from those thoughts and voices, because you are not those thoughts. And what I was getting ready to say earlier before I had my little coughing attack was that I asked on Instagram yesterday for people to share their current thoughts about their infidelity. And they are every person that shared, and I got a lot of responses. I got more responses on that than anything I've ever asked. And those responses are all coming from their victim voice. And so we have this higher part of our brain that is actually able to see right through the victim voice. But in order to be able to get that part of the brain to work, we have to become aware and get curious of that victim voice that's inside of our head. So I'm not telling you that you have to resist certain thoughts, but what I'm saying is you need to open yourself up to them and get really curious. And then you can gently remind that part of your brain, because honestly, your brain is offering you these things because it wants to keep you safe, or it thinks it's trying to keep you safe. But when you learn to recognize it, then you can begin to reframe it, and then it becomes this new way of life for you. And the first way to do this is just to begin to notice, not resist the thoughts, not make yourself wrong for the thoughts, but just be aware. We talked a little bit about this last week. how you have to be aware in order to face the emotions. Same thing with reframing. You have to be aware of them in order to reframe them. And that first step, that first becoming aware of those voices, those thoughts, those beliefs in your head, for some people that can take a really, really long time, because this is something completely new that you've never experienced before. And if it takes a long time, that's okay. Just let it be where you are as long as you need to be before you move on to the next thing. So if some of what I'm saying you are like, this is way beyond me, that's okay. You're going to come back and rewatch this video when you get to this place, and it will be here for you. Okay, another great way to do this is with the creation model that is inside the Joy Creator Journal. Are you beginning to see how important this is in your work? And I talked about earlier in the teaching, the default models or the default thoughts, which is right here in you've got the default thoughts and then the deliberate. And so these default thoughts, these are the ones from your victim voice. These are the ones you've trained your brain to think over and over and over. And they usually aren't serving you in the way you want them to. And the emotional part of our brain is actually bigger than our prefrontal cortex. So we are meant to experience negative emotions, but we are not created to stay in them. And the problem that happens with so many women is when they experience infidelity in their relationship, they get into those negative emotions and they don't have the skills or the knowledge to get themselves out of it. That is what we are doing here. That's what we are doing inside of Joybound. And so I want you to pull, if you have not printed this out, print this out and use it. And then journaling is another way to reframe. And I love to do this when I'm in a negative emotional state. So instead of saying like, I shouldn't be feeling this way, say, of course I'm feeling this way. Of course I should be feeling this way. Like just talk to your brain and then process through that in your writing. Another one I love to do is thought downloads and begin to see the patterns in those thoughts. And inside your Joy Creator Journal, there is spaces for daily thought downloads, and just start to become aware of what's in your brain. And when you first start to do thought downloads, what your brain is going to want to offer you is like your to-do list. You have to stick with the thought downloads long enough that you can get past the to-do list and into the actual thoughts and voices and beliefs that you are having inside of your brain. So the next part of this teaching is I want to take a few of these thoughts that people shared with me on Instagram, and I want to put them through a creation model. Because this is the part that I think is going to be so helpful for you. And it's really going to give you the skill to be able to do this work. So, for example, we know with the creation model, let me get this in a place where you can see it. Okay, we know with the creation model, we have our thoughts, our feelings, our actions, and what that creates in our life. So here is our thoughts. These are our feelings. These are the actions that we take from those feelings. And this is what we create in our life. Okay? So one of the thoughts that got submitted to me was, will I be able to trust him again? Now, one of the things that comes up, if you're working through some thoughts and there are questions, you need to reframe those into a statement. You need to change them into a statement. So will I be able to trust him again? The thought that's probably under there is, I'll never trust him again. So I'll never trust him again. Now, I've had that thought. Probably every one of us that has experienced infidelity has had that thought. And there does come a time when you have to decide, is that thought true? And for me, in my marriage, I got to the place where I realized I would never be able to trust him. There had been way too much, way too many lies, way too many affairs, just too many things. And then that was when I knew, well, am I willing to stay in a marriage where there's no trust, or am I going to walk away from the marriage? And that's when I knew I needed to walk away from the marriage. So before we work through this model, I want to remind you again about trust, because trust is a big one, especially if you're trying to work through the marriage, if you're trying to reconcile, remember that trust comes from time plus believable behavior. And if you don't have, if your partner, if your husband isn't giving you the believable behavior and you haven't had enough time, the trust will not be there. Trust can come back with those two things, time and believable behavior. So I just want you to remember that. If you are only thinking it needs time or only thinking it needs believable behavior, it's not going to work. You have to have both. And then at some point you have to decide, are they doing enough believable behavior? And has it been long enough for me to create trust? And then you can decide what you want to do from there. But in this situation, let's say they're trying to reconcile after infidelity. And the thought that this person is carrying around is, I'll never trust him again. How does that make you feel? Well, everybody could be different. And inside the Joy Creator Journal, we have our Find Your Feels pages that could help you name what your feelings are. We also have the feelings wheel, which can also help you name what your feelings are. And I want you to get in a place where you get deeper in your feelings than just like, if you'll notice in the center here, it says like mad, scared, joyful, powerful, peaceful, sad. Like, I want you to go deeper than that. I want you to branch out and really try to get as specific as you can on what your emotion is. So in this situation, I'll never trust him again. I think we're going to go with the emotion of fear. That we're going to say that for her creates fear. Now, what do we do in a relationship when we have fear? We check his phone. We make assumptions about his actions. We spend a lot of time stewing over his behaviors. We get stuck in ruminating thoughts. When we believe I'll never trust him again, our brain starts looking for ways to not trust and not believe. And when you have these kind of actions in your marriage, what do you create in your marriage? You create distance. You create more lack of trust. You maybe create some apathy. And do you see how none of those are going to help you to reconcile in the marriage the way you want? And you could say, yeah, but it's true. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust him again. Absolutely, it's true. But you have to ask yourself, is that thought serving me? Is that thought giving me the experience of my life that I want? And if it's not, it's time to reframe it. And basically that means create a new thought. Now, can you go from I'll never trust him again to I'll always, I fully trust him? No, you cannot. But you could go to a thought like, I'm learning to trust again. If this is true, you could change your thought to his behaviors are rebuilding trust. And do you see how just by reframing that thought into something different, when you say, I'm learning to trust again, what do you feel there? You don't feel fear anymore. You might feel encouraged. You might feel motivated to try. You might feel a little safe. There's so many emotions you could feel, but let's just say you feel encouraged. What happens when you in your actions? Well, you start asking yourself, how can I learn to trust him? You start looking for the moments where there maybe is like the trustworthy moments. You start to see more of the good in him versus the bad, untrustworthy of him. And then from that, you create closeness in your relationship. You probably create a partner who's more willing to give you of the believable behaviors that you need in order to create the trust. And all we did was reframe a thought, and you completely transform the experience of your life. This is why this work is so powerful. This is why this is the work we do to heal from infidelity. But when you learn this work, you not only heal from the infidelity for yourself, but you literally completely transform your life in every way. Because when you learn all of these things we're teaching, when you learn the creation model, when you learn thought downloads, when you learn how to face the emotions, when you learn how to reframe, everything we're teaching in Joybound, you can apply it to every area of your life. And you can watch everything in your life transform. So let's work through, I'm not going to write it out, but let's work through another one really quick. So another one was, I got a lot of questions. So we have to change those into statements. Why wasn't our marriage enough? Oftentimes the thought there is, I'm not enough, or I wasn't enough. So when you have this thought of I'm not enough, what might you feel? Let's say you feel inadequate. Okay. How does a person who feels inadequate show up to the world? They're shy. They don't speak up. They're not confident. They don't assert themselves. They don't set up boundaries. They don't show up in the world the way that they want. They don't share their light with the world that they have to share. They create this aura of self-doubt. Okay. So we have that kind of person showing up here. And what does that create in our life? Well, oftentimes what that creates for us after infidelity is a boatload of resentment toward our partner. Because subconsciously, we are now blaming our partner for not feeling enough because of his actions. It creates massive resentment towards our partner, massive resentment towards ourselves, just this general overall sense of like, I'm just not getting out of this life what I want to get out of this. Like the thought that I had so often when I would have that thought, or the thing that I would create, was just this overall looming feeling of I was made for more than what I'm offering the world right now. And I can tell you, since I've done this work, I don't think that about myself anymore. I'm doing the more I was made for, which is this program, which is helping women. And just by reframing that thought. So the thought was, I'm not good enough. What if you looked at his infidelity from a totally different perspective, and you looked at it from a place of, I wonder what has caused him to stray. I wonder what emotional state he is in that has led him to take these actions. Because chances are he's probably carrying around the thought, I'm not good enough either. And the infidelity is his way to try to make himself feel good enough. It doesn't work. But they don't understand all of this work. But how can you take that thought that you have, and how can you reframe it? That's your work this week. And use the creation model to help you, and show up to coaching. Get help with this in coaching. This is what coaching is designed for, to specifically help you reframe your thoughts. This is the most powerful thing we can do in coaching. So I hope to see you tomorrow at noon for our call. And I cannot wait to coach you. I love coaching women and watching them transform. And so I want to see you tomorrow, and thank you for joining us. Remember that this will be up in your portal soon so that you can rewatch it if you need to. Let me check the chat and the Q&A real quick just to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, no chat, no Q&A. So love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow at noon for our live coaching call.